Thank you for being here. Good evening and welcome to Strand Bookstore, the 84-year-old home with 18 miles of new, used, and rare books. I'm Alexandra Weiler, Events Director, and I'm pleased to welcome Mario Batali, Frank Bruni, Emilia Taragni, and Michael White on the occasion of the new edition of Italian cookbook classic, The Silver Spoon, and of Mario Batali's new cookbook, Molto Batali, Simple Family Meals from My Home to Yours. This evening, Mr. Bruni will moderate a discussion among the panelists on the subject of Italian cuisine. Mario Batali and his business partner, Joe Bastianich, own 17 restaurants across the country, including their flagship Babbo in New York City. Last year, they opened Italy, a 50,000-square-foot marketplace in New York City. He is the author of 9 cookbooks, including his new book, Molto Batali. Mr. Batali, well known from the show Iron Chef America, is now starring in a new daytime talk show called The Chew. He started the Mario Batali Foundation in May of 2008 with the mission of feeding, protecting, educating, and empowering children. Frank Bruni was named restaurant critic for the New York Times in April 2004. Before that, Mr. Bruni worked as a reporter in the Washington, D.C. Bureau and was assigned full-time to cover the presidential campaign of Governor George W. Bush. He then covered the White House for the first 8 months of the Bush administration and spent 7 months as the Washington-based staff writer for the New York Times Sunday magazine. Mr. Bruni is the author of a book about George W. Bush called Ambling into History and co-author of The Gospel of Shame. For the past decade, Emilia Taragni has been the editorial director at Baden Press, an international publishing house which publishes books on art, architecture, design, photography, and cooking. She was born in Lake Como, Italy. At 19, she moved to Venice to study art history and then traveled around Italy to pursue her passion for art, architecture, and food. Ms. Taragni's position at Baden brought her to London to combine her work with her personal passion. She takes great pride in translating and editing the cooking Bible she grew up with, The Silver Spoon. Michael White is the award-winning chef/owner of the Altamira Group, which includes the restaurants Maria, Osteria Morini, I Fiori, Duterre, and Dumari. Although his soulful, flavorful interpretations of Italian cuisine indicate otherwise, he is not an Italian native, but a Midwesterner. Last year, Mr. White was named one of the 40 most influential New Yorkers under 40 by Crain's New York Business, and won the James Beard Foundation Award for Best New Restaurant in the country for Maria. He is author of the cookbook Fiamma, The Essence of Contemporary Italian Cooking. Following the conversation, I'll pass around a microphone so the panelists can take questions from the audience, and then Mario Batali will sign copies of Molto Batali. Please turn off your cell phones now if you haven't already done so. Join me now in welcoming Mario Batali, Frank Bruni, Emilia Taragni, and Michael White to the Strand.
So I guess let's get the ball rolling, right?
He has to get up tomorrow morning very early.
Okay, all right. So
we get up every day.
I was curious to hear from all three of you. We'll start with you, Emilia. A question I think I get asked a lot, I think you probably do too. How full an experience of Italian cooking and Italian food can one have these days if one doesn't actually go to Italy? Can one get pretty close to it, and if so, how? And if not, why not? You're first.
Well, I think that, of course, going to Italy is always very good. You can learn a lot. You can see how the real thing is. But I think that right now you can really find the same ingredients, the same produce, the same... even the Italian restaurants outside Italy are extremely good, and they are very keen to do authentic Italian food. So I think that now, of course, if you go to Italy, it's much, much better, but you can definitely learn from books, from restaurants, from good meal to do a very good Italian food.
My answer is yes, you can eat well. Are you talking about the experience of the cook or the experience of the diner?
Oh, you mean your experience as a cooker?
No, like, can I train a great cook to make great Italian food in America without having them go there? Or is the question, can you eat well Italian food?
If you're someone in this audience and you're a lover of Italian food and you don't get to Italy frequently or you've never gotten there, how much are you missing, or if we advance to the point where you're not missing that much if you're a smart consumer here in the United States?
You are missing everything and nothing. In that, the experience of true gastronomy is about traveling to places where they celebrate exact where they are. And in understanding that the ingredient category is similar, but it's entirely different if you're in Zibello and you're eating culatello made right there, and you have it with the pear that was grown on the tree there, you will never find that experience in New York, even if I make my own culatello and I grow the perfect pear 20 feet from that very place. Because what we're celebrating here is the way the wind smells and the way the soil tastes, we use that word a lot, the way the rain falls, the way the ocean affects everything, and the way the harvest season goes. So what you can capture are guys like me and Michael interpreting with the same ideology and pride that a cook from Puglia would when they make zuppa di pesce, and they would never use something from Venice or from Rome or even from Naples or even from Basilicata. They would celebrate the dirt right where they are. And when you get to that point, then you're starting to understand what true Italian food is, and you realize it's not necessarily a category only of cooks in Italy. I think one of the biggest mistakes, and what we've seen a lot in the world, is everyone will import the ingredients from where they're from in Italy and try to make a restaurant that tastes like one from Parma in New York, or in Parma, Ohio, or in Los Angeles. And that's not bad, but what's really good is when you look at the local ingredients and the seasons that they are and treat them like Italian. That is to say, when you do a pasta dish, it's more about the noodle than it is about the sauce and the stuff with it. And you use a very minimal way of approaching it. In that way, you can eat very well in the Italian style in a place a long ways away from it. But it's really understanding that the local ingredients sing more than simply the cook and his or her technique and their cookbooks and their style. This guy is an expert.
No, I think I echo exactly. I have nothing to say after he said that, actually. But no, what it is, I think, what Mario was trying to say is that Italian is a thought process. You know, it's few ingredients. The hallmark of Italian cooking is simplicity, and we have when I started in 1989 cooking Italian food, we didn't have all the ingredients that we do now. Now we have unbelievable vegetables, actually seeds and things. I mean, you go to the green market, you can get
grown here,
which is spectacular. So you get very, very close. What they were both saying was the fact that your mindset, you're in Parma, Zibello, you're thinking, you're smelling. You know, it's a whole mind thing, and then. That's why when people say, "Oh, my mother's meatballs, these are the best," because you have a taste memory. You have like you're locked on what that smell, the perfume is when you walk inside the house. So you can get very, very close to it. And sometimes we have, I would like to say that we have in America now unbelievable vegetables, unbelievable produce, the heirloom pigs that come from Pennsylvania that both you and I use, the chickens. We're not that far behind, and in some respects we're ahead. Like I said. The only thing that's tough is seafood, because the Mediterranean, the Adriatic Sea, the Ionian Sea, they have gamberi rossi and all these different things that we don't have. So both Mario and I and professional cooks and home cooks such as yourself have to make, if you saute shrimp in a pan and you put a couple of cherry tomatoes inside with garlic, and all of a sudden it doesn't taste exactly like you taste at Naples, that's because it just came out of the water. It's very close. America's a very large country. It's just different, but it's pretty close. But he and I would use shrimp shells to maybe make a little bit of brodetto or perfume to enhance it, but in Italy you just don't have to do that. So that's one of the differences.
Michael, you are not, unlike I think the rest of us, you don't have a drop of Italian
I'm
blood.
Norwegian, Scotch Irish. But I started cooking, as everybody knows, not everybody, but
Everybody.
Growing up in the Midwest, the ethnic food of choice is Italian. It wasn't being in, I don't want to say rural Midwest, but when I was growing up as a young person, you always went out to get pizza or spaghetti or lasagna. So the first go-to dish, or the go-to cooking that I wanted to do was Italian. And I got fortunate I was very fortunate to start cooking at a young age in Italian. And I just fell in love with it in Italy.
What is, in focusing on Italian cuisine, not as a matter of heritage, but as choice, what is it about Italian cooking that appeals to you, in a bigger way than any other cuisine?
The simplicity. I mean, like with how few ingredients you can make something great. And I think just perusing through the new book, you're going to see that. But for me, Italian cooking is pasta, those things that we grew up with. When I went to work for the very first time in 1990 at Spiaggia, having potato leek raviolis with pesto is a mind-blowing experience. Now you could never do that. Now people look at you like, you're doing pesto. I make my own pesto. But when I was first shown this, it was like, this is all I wanted to do. I was just completely immersed and fixated on doing. They were doing something called risotto too back then. That's pretty amazing. So,
well, you grew up eating Italian food, right?
I grew up in a half Italian, third-generation immigrant family, and it wasn't only Italian food. We grew up eating. My grandmother made only Italian food in her world. But we also celebrated the bounty in what I consider the Sunset Magazine lifestyle. When you grow up on the West Coast, everyone picks blackberries and makes pies and jam. And everyone pickles their own mushrooms that they find. Not out of some righteous foodie high end. It's more like, well, what I didn't realize, we weren't very rich. We were kind of middle and poor. So this was a way to extend the money. You go out and you buy all this stuff in the lower valley of Yakima Valley. Buy all these vegetables, bring them home. Everyone sits at a table in the backyard, cuts them into little pieces. We cook them all together with a little tuna and a little tomatoes, and we call that antipasto. And to this day, and you can ask Susie, to this day, when someone sends me a bottle of the antipasto that they made last summer, probably in a collective group of 2 or 3 families, it is the treasure that I treasure the most when we talk about stuff. So we had Italian food, but it was seen through the third-generation perspective. And one of the things that's kind of funny is how it had morphed into Italian-American. And that was with no malice or bad intentions by Italian immigrants or second-generation or third-generation immigrants. But when they saw mascarpone, they would go to the store, and there simply was no mascarpone. Now there's mascarpone at the Korean deli. So they saw what they thought was kind of close, which was Philadelphia cream cheese, which is an excellent product, but it's not exactly mascarpone. So when you put that in a baked pasta, suddenly it's an entirely different flavor. Not bad, not maliciously or intentionally evil or wrong, but it's using what you have, which is what Italian people do. And then putting those dishes together in a way that made sense to our Italian family, and yet still celebrated a little bit of that, was kind of where I think we and a lot of the cooks that are kind of in the post-Japanese moments, thinking about how they can make something really good. It is Italian ideologically, but for example, there's a chef in this room right now, Mario Carbone back there, who makes Italian food with not one single ingredient from outside of America, which is a remarkable and interesting way to look at it. Like their olive oil is American, their pasta is American, all their cheese is American. It's a very interesting thing. Isn't that right, Mr. Carbone?
Yes, sir.
You bring a different perspective. You grew up in Italy, you live in Europe now, you live in London. When you come to America and you eat in, let's say, the Italian restaurants in New York, where do you see the American spin on things? Where do you see a sort of American inflection that makes these restaurants different from the ones you would find in Italy?
Well, I can see that sometimes you find dishes that people think that they are really, really Italian, but I've never heard about it. Such as spaghetti with meatballs. Something that I've never heard about it. And but I've, especially in the last few years, I could see that there are more and more similarity in the way they cook it the Italian way. And it's really about having very, very few ingredients and very, very fresh ingredients combined together. And there are not fixed rules, also because Italy it's not a small country, it's quite a small country, but the variety of food is huge. And sometimes, even in Italy, I go to places where I taste things that I've never tasted before. So I think that is more the attitude of cooking with simple ingredients, very fresh, very seasonal. For example, for me, it was quite funny when I moved to London, and there was all the things about seasonal ingredients. And for us, it's something absolutely normal. I never had a tomato salad in Italy. So it's more the attitude towards the food and towards the ingredients than not really what is the result of the dish itself.
When you're translating this from Italian to English, you're obviously changing the language. Do you find you also have to change the instructions or write other things in different ways to anticipate? So what are some things you have to do to make sure this is going to be accessible to and understandable to a cook outside of
Well, first of all, in Italian, the recipes are much, much shorter. So a lot of things, because most of the explanation are not there, and people, they all think that most of the preparation, you know how to do it. So I remember that when we started, there was a recipe for a fish, and in Italian you say, take the fish, put in the pan, and they say, oh, you have to clean it, you have to wash it, you have to, so all these kind of things. And you need more explanation, because all the basic you really learn in your family, and you don't need to spell them out. And also there is a very interesting thing in which, in the way the recipes are written. For example, in the Italian way, we list the ingredients in terms of importance. And in the US, you list the ingredients in terms of appearance. That I think is a very interesting way of doing it, because for us, you just have to look at which are the main ingredients, and the ones that are not the main, you can substitute them. So there is more creativity. While I think that in the UK and US, there is more, you want to be more prescriptive in the list and how you use the ingredients and so on. And yeah, it's more. In the Italian version is actually much shorter.
Let me ask you this: is the British Isles version the same as the American version, or you had to, in addition to putting them in metric, did you have to change the recipes for the English? Is it even longer for the English?
No,
it's the same.
No,
I was just hoping they were a little further behind, but I guess not.
It's fine. No, it's mainly changing the measurements and a lot of the ingredients.
Right.
And also the language is slightly.
No, but in Italian you would say un bicchiere di vino, a glass of wine. We have to have ounces.
Yeah.
You know, it's understood.
Which glass?
Right, exactly. Which glass are you talking about? I don't have all those questions.
Yeah, one cucchiaio of sugar. It's just, how big is that? I mean, it's already understood. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, because you
I think in Italy there's a certain intuition.
Yeah.
Exactly.
People pretty much all know how to cook. Maybe the generation of children from like 10 to 30 right now may have missed a boat. Where I lived in Emilia-Romagna, everybody knew how to make tortellini until about people 10 years younger than me. And nobody did it. And it wasn't that they were just disgusted or they didn't like them. They knew they could get them from their mom. But they were also tired of it, and they really wanted something with curry in it. Like they were hoping to expand, because all of these dishes represented the old guard for them. And although they would eat them at their house and they loved them and they felt passionate about them, every now and then they wanted to go to McDonald's, or they wanted to go to something Asian, which in Bologna there are maybe 2 Chinese restaurants, and they're worse than the worst of the worst American ones in Columbus, Ohio. I mean, it's not very much to do with China, just like those don't. But that said, they all kind of they look at pop culture in America and they get excited about that, just like
They don't even have egg foo young.
But the Italians, a lot of them in the generation that's right after ours, are tired of the standards, and they're kind of moving away from it. And it's perhaps, in my opinion, the greatest loss of kind of a traditional chunk. Not lost forever, because someone will refine it again, and the slow food people are excited about it. But what do you think, Frank? You actually live in and around Italian people. Were they losing some of their care for their food, or were they just becoming more international?
I don't know, because I don't have a historical perspective. I mean, I was there for a 2-year period.
Right.
So,
well, did you eat at people's houses, though? Did they make classic Roman food?
They made very simple, I mean, all the things you guys have said, they made very simple dishes. I mean, I think because a lot of us eat our Italian food in restaurants, and restaurants feel the need to put on a certain degree of a show, I think the Italian eating is great here, but I think it's hard for cooks often to stay as simple as tradition would have it, because it doesn't look to customers like they're putting enough effort into it. I mean, I see it, and you're cooking, I see you doing bells and whistles, but I feel like you're doing this because otherwise a diner's going to feel on beach.
No, exactly. We have to justify why a person or a group would come to a restaurant. We have to do a little bit something with, I think, younger, I mean, not that we're that old, but younger cooks who are moving up always are trying to show and show and show. I think I'm doing less of that now and more simple on the plate now, just because of that, to kind of get back to the roots of simplicity, cooking Italian.
Everyone's been talking a little bit about ingredients, and you made the good point that real Italian eating is eating ingredients that are close to the source. What are you, what are each of you in your restaurants importing from Italy? Because even despite that local ethos, you feel like you really can't give diners the best experience unless you're bringing it from Italy.
For me, tomatoes, number one, that's the single most important, difficult ingredient to get in America is tomatoes. We have a short window period in July and August to get tomatoes, but so we bring in beautiful canned tomatoes, extra virgin olive oil, seafood in some respects, bring in wild seafood, but other than that,
Don't shut that off. I just remarked it was just, this is unbelievably refreshing.
I think, well, I think we use some of the pantry ingredients that are simply just not the same yet. Although I just recently tasted some botarga from Florida and Michigan.
Really?
And it's crazy stuff.
The botarga from Florida,
Magnificent.
strangely enough, botarga has become such a popular ingredient.
Botarga is the dried roe of fish.
Sorry.
Kind of like a salted caviar, and you grate it over pasta. When you have it in Sicily and Sardinia, it's often soft, almost like pudding. And here it's very hard to dry like cheese. But when you have it in Sicily and Sardinia, and they slice it thin and serve it with watermelon and onions or orange slices, you're like, oh my God, this is the most delightful thing. Here we use it over pastas and bruschetta and things, and it's a little dry. Now we're finding that there's this American producer who's making a really good product, and I'll tell you about the price fixing we're going to set in a minute.
No, because botarga has become so popular that they're taking raw mullet, a roe, and shipping it to Sardinia, because these guys are shipping 40% from Florida because there's such a want for botarga right now. It's amazing. And it's soft. So it's really good.
It's really good.
Yeah.
But back to products, you have to import things that we simply can't make here. We are able to make pretty good olive oil in California, and there was a very interesting piece by
Julia Muskin
this week that's talking about people on it. She got most of it. She missed a couple of what I think are the better producers. Sea salt we can make, but there are things like prosciutto di Parma. There are things that are good, but they're not 18-month Parma Riserva or San Daniele. There are different kinds of salumi that are unavailable. Parmigiano Reggiano, although Bella Jack is unbelievable, it says that, and I love that, and we'll use it in Italian-style dishes. But Parmigiano Reggiano is one of the undisputed kings of just about anything, and when you bring it over here, it's just as good. And I think to dispel a common misconception, I can tell you right now, buying the less expensive one just means you're buying a younger one, which may in fact be better to eat than the 4 or 5-year-old that you'll see at a higher price. So search and taste things. You know, you got to go to a place like Di Paolo and engage Lou and let him describe to you the difference between 4 Gorgonzolas. You will walk away with a PhD in blue vein cheeses, and you will also walk away with the best thing in the market for you personally. And it's understanding that kind of shopping is what really gets it. But that said, there's really great blue cheese in America, and they're just different. So you want that specific flavor, you kind of go for the imported.
Can you get everything you want in London?
Yes, there are things that cannot travel. For example, a burrata. It's very difficult to find it and to travel. But London, it's quite easy to find good ingredients. And again, it's always better to get the fresh local ingredients than try to find something that comes from Italy for the sake of it. So I usually prefer to buy local ones.
Well, England has unbelievable dairy products that are even not at all like the Italian ones, but better in some cases. You find that clotted cream for me is one of the craziest, most delicious things.
But olive oil and Parmigiano and Parmesan and these kind of things, yes, I buy it. Or I bring it.
Now, we talked about the translation of this. Are all the recipes that are in the Italian version here, or were there some that it just didn't make sense to include?
No, at the end, that was something that we asked ourselves if there were some recipes that were a little bit too hard for the American audience, like a lot of liver.
Who are you calling stupid?
No, it's not. It's just a question of culture and of being used or not. But then you have 2,000 recipes, so if you don't like it, then make it. And
that was very Italian.
No, it's true. I mean, I think that it's also interesting to read the recipes. So if you want to know and to understand how a specific piece of meat is cooked, I think it's nice to have it. And then if you don't like it, I mean, there are a lot of things that I don't like it, and I don't make it.
You mentioned it's fun to read the recipes. Today, as people buy cookbooks, I mean, like you and I had some dealings when Renee Redzepi was here. And that's a beautiful book from Noma, and it's hard to imagine anyone cooking a single thing from it. And it flew off the shelves. What are people doing with all these cookbooks that they're buying and not cooking from? Could someone explain this?
Well, it depends on the book. This one
is very useful, very useful.
This one you cook from. I think that the books like Noma, they are kind of inspirational and definitely are for chefs, for if they want to cook from it. And for normal people, it's very nice to read it.
So I had two different friends as gifts sent me the Gnome Cookbook, and I thought this is absolutely beautiful. And you know, I'm not a great cook to begin with.
You're going to re-gift one of those this holiday season.
You didn't get yours yet?
Well, I think also a lot of the chefs and people that are involved in the food culture are archivists. They want to know how the history, what brought Ferran Adrià to where he came from. How did it go from burning garlic and overcook everything in Spain in 1978 to him in 1985 being so relevant? And how did food change that way? And why is everyone talking about Danish food right now when 5 years ago you couldn't find a nasty sardine to put on a piece of dried out weird bread from that culture? And now that it's fascinating because there are people that
You're
are
talking about my
interpreting
heritage, right?
No, I know. And I'm sure it was... Well, did you find a good one outside of your house ever though? And I think people look at it more as a historical perspective and the movement as cooking goes forward. So
it's really not a cookbook, it's more of a piece of anthropology and history program.
Right, exactly. And I would say the same might even be said for the French laundry cookbook. Like those are dishes that are very complicated unless you're really going to commit to it. It's a beautiful document and it's remarkable to read, and a lot of people now read cookbooks as much as they read novels. They don't ever intend to live like the characters in Jay McInerney's novels, nor do they intend to cook like Thomas Keller. They just enjoy the idea of being in someone else's shoes.
Just something that.
So,
He's just cackling away over here.
I'm thinking of James McInerney.
Well, other than the cookbooks of present company, if we're talking about cookbooks that are useful, each of you, because I'm sure these people here, 3 cookbooks you can't live without. In terms
Me personally?
Yeah.
On a personal level?
As a home cook.
Yes. As a home cook? I don't cook at home.
All right. Take that condition out.
La Cucina Originale, which is an old, maybe it's. Would you consider that like the joy of cooking, like an old form of the joy of cooking?
Yeah.
More or less.
Older.
This is something that you would get, but you do the same with the something that everybody has in their kitchen, you would say.
You give it to newlyweds.
You give it to newlyweds, much like the
book that you would have a reference point to look at if someone ever said, I want you to make lasagna like they make in Umbria. You say, oh, well, I never heard of it, but let me take a look. And they'll find whether they do or not, and there'll be a reference to it.
That's one. And then for every region, the type of cooking that we do in the restaurants, we have many different folks that we use just as kind of checking them out. And because none of our recipes that we do in the restaurants are, we might take something from Umbria, we might take something from Sardinia and cook them together. So it's really, books are tough for me. It's more about reading history, and I'm sure you would say the same.
There are ones that I look at like that, and then there's also ones that if I need to know how to make a cowboy cookie or a French whatever, a French meringue, I will look in How to Cook Everything almost on a regular basis because I'm rarely disappointed. At least I find something in there. Right, I find at least an idea, and then you drive from there. You don't need too much more than a roadmap to make something like a Swiss meringue. The idea of making a Swiss meringue and heating it up and pouring the whites into it is something that I remember vaguely, but if I want to know how to make it, I'm going to find it probably in Mark Gibbon's book. And if I don't, then I'm going to look in some other pastry book, maybe The Joy of Cooking, and...
I mean, I think that when you say
Julia Child,
but a roadmap, the silver spoon is a roadmap, and it really gives you the basis, and then you can adapt from that. I think that's really the shortness of the recipes gives you that. You can use this or you can do that. I think that's really what.
How concerned were you in putting this together about getting a certain kind of Italian regional diversity? I think a lot of people don't realize how diverse cooking is. You know, from one to another of the 20 regions in Italy.
Well, actually, this is something that we realized when, after we did the first edition, that there was practically no mention about the different region in Italy. And for this edition, we have had an introduction in which we talked a little bit more about the different region and how there is some food that is really specific of a specific region, and other that are now spread out in the entire country. I think that this idea of the region in Italy is again very much linked to the ingredients. So because it's a local cuisine, and because it's so local, it uses ingredients that sometimes grows only in that specific area. And that is the reason why there are so much division between the different regions. You will not find a lot of, in the north you use mainly butter, because you have a lot of dairy product. You don't really find butter in the south, where they use olive oil. So it's more related to the culture and to the product than to really a regional attitude. But in the book there are a lot of recipes that are typical, and some of them they really have the name, like from pizza napoletana to risotto milanese, in which you really see that the origin is specific of the region.
In aggregate, are there certain regions that are most heavily represented?
No, it's quite, it represents most of the region, with probably a certain emphasis on the central north of Italy.
What do you all think, in each of you, what do you think there is some regional Italian cooking that still is vastly underexposed outside of Italy? Like here, and let's take New York. What sort of regional Italian cooking is still very hard to find, at least at a skill level here?
I would say Sardinian food is underrepresented in some respects. Liguria.
I honestly can't think of one region that I find completely properly represented.
Yeah.
I think that people bandy the word Tuscan around, and a couple places use Roman or Venetian, but in all honesty, I don't think we have anybody outside of the people in this room and a couple maybe others that are exploring the regionality of things, because it seems that it might cost them customers not to offer spaghetti with pesto, even if you're in a restaurant from the Alto Adige. And so I would say what would be lacking right now is a true commitment on other cooks' behalves to make something as specific as Osteria Morini. I think that might be one of the greatest restaurants that's in New York City, because I'm in love with Emilio Romagna, but also because he does it right. It's not merely that it took a map.
I haven't done pesto, and that's why.
Well, and you won't. But you can do gramigna with sausage, and you can do tortellini and brodo, and you do the tigelle like it's right. And I mean, it's not just the Michael White show, but in all honesty, for me, when I go out for Italian, it's almost always the Michael White show. Because I get what I'm hoping for, which is regional commitment, which is the hardest thing to do when you have a restaurant in Midtown on 58th Street, and you have to make the people in the businesses happy and the people in the hotels happy, and they don't give a shit what the Alto Adige is. They don't even know where it is. They don't know that it's different than the Trentino. And they don't really know the difference between Bolzano, Bergamo, and Bologna. So they're not, I mean, we can't hold them accountable. But as a business opportunity, it's a much more difficult trade to play something as it would be in real Bolzano.
Which of your restaurants is the most tightly regionally focused?
Luca. Luca's pretty clearly Roman, and we don't really make even a very big name. So it's...
But I also want to say that even though it's not, and I'm, like corn, for example, is not Italian. It is for polenta and those types of things. But he would take corn, and I guess he's the person that is in '93 when you opened. You were cooking inherent American ingredients in an Italian fashion, so making sweet corn caponata, but using vinegar and sugar and anchovy and those types of things to what we would traditionally make artichoke or eggplant. But he's using ingredients and letting it know that it's okay to do that. And so I think a lot of cooks that cook Italian food now are using certain ingredients that are inherently American that are not, but we cook them in an Italian style, and that's something that he has done quite well.
And I'm all for it, and I think it works really well. But what I'm longing for is someone to make me something like a borlenghe from the hills outside of Modena, which is this fat, flat, thin little paper thin bread that is crisp on the outside and yet has a slightly bagel toe, and they smear lardo with rosemary and garlic over it, and you're drinking stone-cold Lambrusco overlooking a hill.
Effervescent.
It's very sparkly effervescent Lambrusco. And for me to try to capture that moment is what I'm looking for. Exactly. Like, we get goosebumps thinking about that moment. And it would be interesting to find places like that. And we can't say that we've led completely, but we're considering that when I opened my first restaurant in New York City in 1993, that's the virtual Stone Age for the kind of cooking that's happening in New York City in 2011. Like, it's come so far, and the clientele has become so much more sophisticated and know what authenticity may or may not be. So it's time for kind of a new thing. We're thinking about really trying to do kind of a Veneto kind of Friulian taverna now. That's next. And I think with the kind of beer support and sources that we have, we might be able to create something like that, but we're still trying to figure out how and why.
You were talking about the difficulty of pleasing so many different kinds of customers. How much are we victims of our desire to see a long menu? You asked me before about eating in Italy. When I think of the restaurants I eat in most frequently in Rome, the menu is so short, the waiter would come by and say, stasera abbiamo, tonight we have, and just speak at you, and that was the whole thing. If we could wean ourselves off of really long menus, would we have better cooking?
I think so, to some extent. I mean, at Maria, we have at any given time 80 things on the menu, but they could be small things. But we have 24 people in the kitchen as well. So, but the small restaurants which you're speaking of, I think you're going to get better cooking because there are 4 antipasti.
And less people touching it.
Exactly.
And their qualifications. I mean, at Babo we have a pretty big menu. And I'd say we probably have right now 16 antipasti, 20 primi, and probably 14 secondi, plus a pasta tasting menu, plus a regular tasting menu, of which, of course, you can also order the vegetarian tasting menu. So there might be 180 items in the mise en place. Like, there's 180 different little containers of stuff that we put together.
Want to get in the restaurant business?
But what that does is gives us joy. It also makes, when a customer comes into the restaurant and they come in and they look at a menu like that and they can assume that we're going to execute it mostly pretty darn good. When they go there and they're only with 2 or 4 people, they have to come back because they couldn't eat everything they wanted to try. So we kind of drive them crazy with that as an intentional move. And I don't think that we have to sacrifice. I mean, one thing that we do, we make our fresh pasta and we put it in the freezer the moment we make it. So we don't have to make all 18 kinds of pasta every day. And in a 2 to 3 day cycle, we move through it all. But that gives us the opportunity to do that. In Bologna, I learned that in the tiny little trattoria I lived in because we only had 24 seats and we just couldn't make the kind of 10 pastas that we needed to do. There are other restaurants where they have the sfollina, the women who come and make it, and they wouldn't save it from lunch to dinner. Like they think in a crazy, beautiful way that makes those restaurants great. So we take some kind of moves on it, but I think offering a large menu doesn't necessarily mean that it's not working. It just means you have a much larger kitchen staff.
You have to have many people to do. Go ahead.
No, just to pull back from that, we're talking about long menus, complicated stuff. I want to stress that this is an accessible book. Talk about a couple recipes in here that honor Italian simplicity and that really anybody who's got a little bit of commitment can make. Some of your favorites.
Well, for me, one of my favorites is actually pesto, because I think it's something that first of all, everyone always buys in a jar, and it's 5-minute job. I mean, it's so easy, and you always have to have a pot of fresh pesto because you can't live without it. So it's just very, very easy. And please don't use a blender, use a mortar because it's so much nicer. If you just do this movement with your mortar and the smell and the perfume of the leaves of the pesto mixed with the garlic and the cheese and the oil. It's like a magic because you have these leaves and then you have this sauce. It's amazing. And it's 5-7 minutes.
And what is your opinion on nuts and pesto? Very controversial subject among a lot of Americans. The pine nut crowd, the walnut crowd.
It's funny. In this book we have 2 recipes for pesto. One with the pine nuts and one without. So.
And no walnuts.
No. Pine nuts.
That's awesome.
Oh, I grew up around a lot of pesto. Let's, I don't know where we are in time, but I want you all to be able to ask questions, so let's turn it around. There's a woman with a microphone. There was. Where'd you go?
She's making little pesto.
Well, you know, the room is small enough that I think if anyone just speaks up loudly, they'll be able to be well heard. So who would like to ask one of these 3 a question?
One of us 4.
These 3. No one ever wants to be the first one, and then there'll be 10.
Right.
There you go. There's a brave man right there.
Well, firstly, I just wanted to say thank you for being here. We're from Australia, and I'm second-generation Italian from Australia. Have you got any thoughts about the Italian food culture in Australia, and also the culture you talked about? You know, the loving and the care of food in the Italian family is so important to us. My grandparents are now passed on. Just wondering how we preserve that culture, second and third generation.
I think Australia is an excellent example of a place that's a zillion miles away from Italy and yet celebrates its local products for the simple reason that it costs a lot to ship stuff from somewhere else. So you have a magnificent seafood, you have a great wine and grape culture, you have a great cheese-making culture. You have a great meat culture. So you're like Italian. And if you have the Italian roots and you have Italian recipes that your family has passed on to you, the only way to preserve them is to make them. And again, when you make pesto, don't put it in a blender. Make it old-fashioned style. When you make raviolis, don't put them through a pasta machine. Make them by hand, or make them however they made them. My grandma used to roll out a sheet, put all the stuff on top, put another sheet on top of it, and then roll over it with this rolling pin with the little segments in it. We would never do that now. It would seem like you'd have to make so many. But the idea, keep making those old recipes in that style if you can, and pass it on to your kids. And then they, or anybody that you're talking to, it doesn't even have to be your children, it could be your friends, your cousins, it could be even older people in your family. Sharing that experience is what is all about Italian culture. It's about being at the table. It's about, almost more so, when you're done eating, don't clear the table in a hurry. Let it sit there with stuff on it for 20 minutes. Just as an exercise in not constantly moving forward and trying to do something. The Italians have a certain kind of sacred moment over the table, and they'll sit there on a Saturday or a Sunday, which are kind of the big ones, particularly Sunday, and they'll go to lunch at 1 o'clock, and they'll still be there at 4:30. Not because they're just forking out or they're trying to make it a long experience. They're just enjoying that experience. So that's what you have to do, is really celebrate the table, I would think. And that goes anywhere.
Hi, how are you? I think you guys are all wonderful, and I really appreciate this. My question is that, can you speak in the microphone? Is it? No? Okay. You all talk about authenticity in cooking and how you just probably throw it around together a lot and stuff. Have you ever thought of opening just a very tiny restaurant where you just be true to the cuisine, like, a certain area, like 10 eats a night, and given the sophistication that I think New Yorkers have with their dining, just really doing it for that purpose?
No, that's a perfect world. I think the closest that I'll be able to come is Emilia Romagna and what I do at Osteria Marini, because just economically, it's not feasible to do it in New York City. Now, outside of New York, that's all of our dreams, chefs, all of our peers, having 12, 15, 20 seats. It might have been a fleeting moment of dream, but it comes and goes, though. It really does. But the beauty about being in New York City is that I can have a restaurant such as Osteria Marini that really deals around Bologna, down to Port Lee, and up to Piacenza. It's a very, very small area. So that's the beauty about we can be so specific in New York City. But it's the ideal restaurant, like you're speaking of, is extremely difficult with leases and people and it's impossible, almost impossible.
I think for me the dream of that would be, that's kind of what you do after you retire.
Yeah.
And you have a restaurant that's maybe open on Saturdays and Sundays for lunch, and you do something where you create kind of one menu with a couple of variations, and you do it more as a hobby. As a commerce operation, it's probably not so likely. But as an artistic expression, it may be the natural step for guys like he and I to go do fly and over. Delightful. Thank you so much.
I need chopsticks.
There you go.
So it's been remarked upon a couple of times by a few of you tonight that when it comes to Italian cooking there aren't really any rules. So it sounds like in some respects it might be a bit of anything goes. But I want to know if there's anything that you guys see on menus at perhaps not so good Italian restaurants that ever really makes your blood boil, that people are perhaps cooking.
Cilantro?
Is there something in Italian food that you see in America or England that makes you unhappy about that restaurant?
I think it's. I'm much more interested in the result. So there's not preconception in a way. So I don't really see anything that would confuse or that would be completely wrong or. Just use it in the right way, in the right ingredient. And it's more about combining than say, oh my God, I can't. And that is personal taste, but that's different.
Well, for me, to echo that, I would say that everything isn't wrong until you can tell when someone hasn't literally set foot in Italy when they start doing rigatoni with clams. It's more about the natural place where certain shapes and kinds of pasta go with certain condiments and sauces that it's just, there's some things that they would just go, oh, in Italy and say, what the hell's going on here? And that's where I see it. But it doesn't even offend me that much. I'm all right.
Towards the back.
Have you ever seen a marrying of Italian food with molecular gastronomy? Or are they not possible together?
Well, first of all, Hugh, the molecular...
Thanks for the tough question.
No, I think that it really comes down to the first question is, everything is made of molecules that I can. So far, I haven't found any non-molecular gastronomy ever. So I understand what you're saying, though. The question is there a way when changing something's texture or feel or mouthfeel by using gelatin or aeration, is there a place for that in Italian cooking? Not in tradition, but nor was it at all involved in the tradition of Spanish cooking. So guys like Frank, didn't you write a great piece about where were you at?
Well, when you asked the question, I immediately thought of Osteria Francescana.
Right, Francescana.
In Modena, and they have a dish there, and their kind of emblematic dish is called 5 Textures of Parmesan.
Right.
And there's a Parmesan air, and there's a Parmesan foam, and it essentially takes the principles of molecular gastronomy, for lack of a better phrase, which is like, say, how can we get this flavor, this experience in the kind of most distilled, concentrated form, regardless of like the context of a normal dish. And they're just playing with the flavor of Parmesan and saying we're giving it to you this way, we're giving it to you that way. That's Italian and molecular gastronomy.
But did you like it?
I like that restaurant. I've had it. I've had. There are a number of places in Italy that do that. I ate at a restaurant recently in Milan called Facco, where I really was not that fond of the way they did it. Osteria Francescana is fantastic, and so is a place in outside of Turin called Combal Zero.
I was going to say Combal.0 you really enjoyed,
yes,
right?
very much. Yeah.
So it exists.
The recipe's in here.
There you go. Bottura's recipes in this book. Buy this book now. Yes.
The greatest thing that you own is the kindness that you have in your heart to be the When I see you, I say, God bless him. I've been following you since you started.
Thank you very much.
Great. You are a great human being. I watch the show every day. With my wheels and all, I run. I saw you today, all the shows, the Halloween shows.
Yeah, they're doing them all week.
What was his costume?
He didn't have a costume, but I wanted it food. It looked so good, and I was so happy.
Let me tell you, in a slightly macabre way, my favorite costume for the last 10 years, and I could not put it on the tube because it's inappropriate, but I can say that it's not inappropriate for this crowd. My best costume is I take a new potato, I tie a string to it, and I tie the string to my belt. I am a dictator. That does not play at 1 o'clock on National Network TV. No. They said, what do you want to dress up? I said, I've only got one gig. So we didn't play that part today.
And I could just... My mouth is watering.
Well, thank you.
We got to give the two of you a
Okay, there's another question. All right, what's your question?
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, I'm from the Philippines, and I have actually 2 questions. One for Mr. Rani and one for the chefs as well. I just wanted to know what made our Filipino adobo merit inclusion in the silver spoon, because I saw that you have the Philippine chicken adobo as part of the list of the recipes in the book. And for Chef Batali and Chef White, I just wanted to know also what made you decide to open your restaurant in Asia? You opened Mocha in Singapore, and I think you're doing one in Hong Kong. And congratulations to the 4 of you and all the work that you've done.
Okay, this book contains most of traditional authentic recipes, but also it reflects what is the culture of eating in Italy now. So this book started in 1950, the first edition was in 1950, and since then it's been always updated continuously. And sometimes it's been updated because they wanted to make sure that it can be used in contemporary cuisine, but also because some of the culture in food has changed. Now we cook less, especially fish and vegetable. We use less fat, and we also look a little bit outside Italy at what is happening. So it's also a way to show what is the culture of food in Italy now. So that's probably the reason.
Why did you open in Asia, Chef White?
I opened in Asia. So I opened in Hong Kong because of the fact that we have a tremendous amount of customers that travel back and forth to Hong Kong. There are a tremendous amount of companies that are here based in New York City, and the opportunity arose, and there are thousands of expatriates that are from America that work and come back and forth to Hong Kong, and it is also an extremely stimulating place for a chef to go to the markets and such. And I also love dim sum. So, but you never know, Manila. What's the place? What's this place with the sweet cheeseburgers? What's it called? They have one in
Jollibee.
Jollibee,
Yeah,
exactly.
one in Queens.
I've had the fried chicken in Jollibee in Hong Kong, and it's pretty darn good. You're next. It's in a casino, though. This is completely different. I can't wait to hear this.
Hold on. I'm opening in Hong Kong because he opened it.
But how did you know he was opening in Hong Kong? That's what I want to know.
No, I didn't know about Chef Batali in Hong Kong. I knew about you. But I think he was in Singapore. So.
We
And I'm
opened
opening in Singapore because he opened in Singapore.
because he's a Formula One fan. That's what he's
That's
married.
another reason.
We opened in Singapore because there's a lot of our staff that would love to travel the world. And the Singapore casino is the same family as the casino that we operate in Las Vegas. And the people that are funding it were very high on us doing something with them. And they make you a very good deal. The beauty of Singapore is that there is amazing products there. And the difficulty of Singapore is still, though there's no culture of olive, there's not really a culture of tomato. So we do have to import ingredients a long ways, an incredibly vast carbon footprint that we actually need to do. And they bring them there, and the cost is reflected. So it costs a little bit more there. But the appetite for the Singaporeans seems to be very, very high, and they are a group of people that love to eat. So for us to choose a place, I would more quickly open in Singapore than a place in America that I know nothing about because I've never been there, but also because there's a larger volume. When we look at New York City, we think, well, the beauty of New York is even if 3 million people don't like you, there's 5 million left. And we don't do that so that we can insult them. But we do that so that we can have opinions about how the dining experience, in our opinion, should go. Mr. Bruni himself made a big comment at the end of one of his articles, the very first article he wrote for the Times, about how appropriate would it be to listen to the Black Crows while you're eating your bucatini. And in fact, that may cost us a certain level of notoriety or stars or even a certain group of people. But the beauty in a large place is that you can have a very thought-out experience, from the lighting to the entrance to the seats to the music, to the food, most importantly, and deliver it to a group of people who simply really love it. And that is the best thing about being a restaurateur, is delivering a product, an experience, to someone who loves it so much that they write you a letter, or they want to shake your hand on the way out. Keep in mind, 30 years ago, becoming a chef was what you did after you got out of the army and before you went to the jail. And that has changed completely in our obsession and our passion with things that give us pleasure. So it's a great way to kind of find places to go. And Singapore was a very natural experience for us, and we loved going.
One question. Let's take one from this side. Anyone? No? This side? Oh, yes.
First of all, thank you guys for coming here. I wanted to ask something, and actually Frank had written an article recently about a place in New York that was some kind of neurological molecular gastronomy combination, and it was extremely expensive. And a lot of things that have come up in all of you guys' discussions about the economics of food. And I wanted to ask, how you guys navigate between giving the most authentic experience and introducing people to authentic cuisine and fresh ingredients and those things, local, and all the things that we like to have in all of our food, and also giving that to a broader group of people and you know, weaning people off of fast food and encouraging those habits to a broader populace.
This is a good one for you to start.
Well, I think that the great success of the Italian cuisine is also because it's quite economical. So we are using ingredients, fresh ingredients that are not really expensive. The secret is to get the best ingredients you can. So it's not about what is around. There are few ingredients, very simple, but you are really to get the best possible, because that's the only way to get a very good dish. And even if you get the best of the best, they are not really expensive. So it's a little bit of a myth that putting together a nice and great meal will be extremely expensive. It always depends. Of course, you have to balance what you are doing. So if you have a very nice piece of meat, a very nice fish, it will be more expensive than other vegetable dish. But if you cook at home, you can definitely afford it.
And in going out to restaurants, I would say that, in general, my most common holy geez moments in Italy are less about expensive dishes and more about that the chef was smart enough, sage enough, wise enough, or simple enough not to put two more things in it. And when you have that holy geez moment, it's often just pasta with one thing, like leeks. Leeks and butter and a little Parmesan is a dish. When they add the smoked squab and the mascarpone and the black peppercorns, suddenly it's more like a problem. And I think that the economic reality of making simpler food is something exemplified by Morini or by Luca or by Otto, where you get very simple dishes, or Teresi, right, exactly, or Teresi, where you get simple dishes that don't need the same of the chef's swollen need to impress you with his or her ability to add something to something that doesn't need it.
I think the greatest thing about Italian food is that when we do a dish at the restaurant, all the cooks and chefs that I have working for me, we think about what we can take out of it after we put it up for the very first time when we're testing something. So do we really need that such and such ingredient? Because less is more in Italian cooking. And it's you feel compelled because we have the press, there are blogs, there are all these types of things that are around us that we feel compelled to put more on the plate, and you have to sit back and do less.
So from the economic perspective, though, you're right. Why isn't there a good plate of pasta for $5 or $6? And I think the answer is that in the Asian community, you can get good pho. And for some strange reason, the broth and the inexpensive cuts work better in that vernacular than they do in the Italian vernacular. And maybe that's an overhead cost in the restaurant, or tablecloths, or whatever it is, or maybe a level of different kinds of training, or cooks, or different things. But you can find great food in New York for $5 to $10. But not very much in my restaurant, I gotta say. However it is, it's not like we're raking in the cash.
Not because we're being a snob with the ingredients, but a decent bottle of olive oil
is $30.
Yeah, like something you would want to finish with is $25 to $30. So and all restaurants talk about the quality of the ingredients. But in Italian cooking, because less is more, like the most difficult risotto to make is butter and Parmigiano. Because if you put too much butter on, you have soup. If you put too much cheese, you don't taste the rice. It's very difficult. It's not as easy as one thinks.
Any other questions?
Okay.
No?
I kind of have a comment to what you said. Because we sit at the prep station at Marine, and the attention to detail and the attention to the perfection of the food is really quite something to see. But personally, I was wondering if you could make the rabbit porchetta an entree instead of an
The question is, she admires the idea, and you were speaking about the complexity of making all of these great things. Was it at Morini or Morea? Morini? And she's wondering why you can't make the rabbit porchetta an entree.
Because we have the porchetta, the big one. No, but we slice that cold. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Any other questions?
I'm going to be naughty and ask a second question. For the home cook who wants to attempt Italian cuisine, authentic Italian cuisine, what are the sort of base ingredients and perhaps some specialist utensils or machines or something that you would recommend that you should have in your larder or in your fridge or in your cupboard?
Well, very, very good quality olive oil. That's
Number one.
That's number one. Very good quality vegetables, fresh and seasonal. Very good quality pasta. That's also another big.
Does it have to be fresh pasta, or is there a big
No,
difference between dried and
More
fresh?
often than not, Italians eat dried pasta. Fresh pasta is kind of a Sunday thing or a special party thing. Dried spaghetti or dried pasta is 7 days a week. And on the dinner of the seventh day, grano duro, the hard wheat, which some of it comes from Canada and America, and they import it there. But their technique of making dried pasta is that they dry it a lot longer. So you have a much bigger window of mistake. And if you overcook it by 30 seconds according to the package instructions, it's still going to hold its shape. American pasta just kind of falls to nothing. So the pasta.
No, and I was just going to say, when Amelia's talking about fresh ingredients, instead of buying garlic that's already peeled, it's really amazing how you take a head of garlic. It's a novel thing, right? And you press it, and you really give it another bruise, and you open up the skin, and all of a sudden the garlic skin, all of a sudden you have this beautiful perfume, and just simply warming this in olive oil. So I don't want you to think that we're talking about super exotic vegetables. That's what we're talking about. We're just talking about the simplest things, but not buying pre-cut or
fresh herbs.
Yeah.
That's something that you can grow very, very easily.
He and I would like to think that it's magic, but it's really not magic. It's just having respect for ingredients.
So for a short list though, dried pasta, anchovies, make your own breadcrumbs, extra virgin olive oil, Parmigiano Reggiano, some kind of prosciutto or porky fried, pancetta, some kind of a salami. What? And canned tomatoes. You have that, and you're ready for anything that comes at you. You can make a great pasta dish, right? Or bordio rice, or one of the 3 big parameters. But once you have that, then you just go to your green market and find something, whether it's one of those killer white crabs that I ate there, or whether it's some grapes from your region that you want to make schiacciata out of into a bread. Like, there's so many great things around. If you have just those basic pantry ingredients and 2 knives and a cutting board and a pasta roller, you're set.
At holiday time, when I go back to Wisconsin to see my folks, because I have to have a busman's holiday, I have to cook when I go home. And I open up the drawer, and there's maybe like 100 different types of tools, and I have to ask my father what these are for. So you only need a spoon and a knife. That's all you need, and a spatula. No special equipment.
So the resounding sentiment from the discussion today was really that there's desire to kind of bring more regional specialties and bring that authenticity here to New York specifically. But, in order to bridge that gap and kind of mitigate the commercial risk of having an operation like that, is the onus really on the consumers to demand more of, the regional authenticity, or is it on you as restaurants or as chefs to kind of deliver it to us first and then respond to that?
I think having on my menus, I have a mix of the things that make the customer happy, and what we call items that are safe, and then we have the items that we introduce that are more regional, or maybe like tonight we're doing soft polenta with fried chicken livers, and we put that on top of, and so the softness of polenta with crisp. That's a tough sell, but it's gaining speed. We have to try because it gives inspiration to all of my cooks in the kitchen, but also to the guests. And I hate to use this word, but foodies, people who really appreciate food, go for that kind of dish. So it's a slow process, but as Mario was saying, 10 years ago, he said 30 years ago in America, but it's more like, for me, 20. That when I told my father that I was going to be a cook, he said, "That's terrific. How are you going to make a living?" Okay? So it was a blue-collar job, and I think that I'm going away from the subject, but the subject is that we have to cook. It's a two-way street, really, I'd like to say.
I think the onus is on neither of us. I think that as long as people buy and support the kind of restaurants that we already operate, we're likely to open more, not necessarily because we have a manifest destiny and want to take over the world, but as our line cooks become sous chefs and our sous chefs become executive chefs and our executive chefs need somewhere to go, we open restaurants for that very reason. It's not that I wanted 19 restaurants. It never even occurred to me that I would have 19 restaurants. But I have 19 great people that were either going to work for me as co-owners or we're going to work for Danny Meyer or Michael White. So I've got to keep them on my team. So we open restaurants, and it's their fascination with perhaps Sardinia or Sicily. I have 2 guys on my team right now that are ready to take Sicilian food to the right level in some place, probably Brooklyn, because they can afford the rent and they can be a little bit more responsible to the bottom line. And I've never really done anything in Brooklyn, so I'm excited and nervous. I think Brooklyn is perhaps the most exciting scene going on right now, but not all of Brooklyn is great, just like not all of Manhattan is great. So it's kind of the support that you give to the restaurants, and the general water flow of them is what builds people's ability and thought process to go make an authentic something.
But it's happening, though. What you're saying is happening. It's just happening at a slow pace. I mean, 10 years ago, you could never find spaghetti with clams and pancetta. Here's the person that's doing clams and pancetta, because clams in Italy are much more saline, or they have a much more salty. So we never find it. So it's happening. You just don't know it's happening. Am I speaking out of turn?
No, I think so. But I think as we go forward, we'll see the restaurants will open as the customer is ready for them. I don't think that
as we teach our
guys to love that.
Love that, because they have to buy into what we're doing as well. Because everybody, I say everybody, lots of young people that are cooking want to show what they can put on a plate. So
more significantly, they want to win at Top Chef.
Exactly.
And then they don't want to work for 7 years.
Yeah.
So it's hard to figure out where the category is, because unfortunately the media has kind of skewed the way the job is looked at. And suddenly people are saying, well, I know you have 2 restaurants, but you have a TV show, a magazine, and a book deal. And it's like, well, it happens to some of us, but it's like saying that everyone expects to be a successful movie actor. There are thousands and thousands of movie actors who aren't yet famous who work in our restaurants right now. And that's a great thing, but it's the same thing with the kind of restaurant idea. The success of a restaurant used to be measured just that you had a great living and a great lifestyle, and your family was in it. Now it's only measured by whether you've been on one of these reality eating shows and taken some hits from Joe Bastianich, for example. And it's a different game right now. So all the cooks that are really into it for the food are trying to figure out whether they still can play.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. Mario will be signing his book now, Culture Batali. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're going to get your son?
Yeah. She'll sign it right here, right next to me.
Get your camera ready?